I'm glad to see everybody here. I think most of us have worked together so far since this COVID crisis has begun. So I think that's been one of the more positive parts of this. We have, I think we already have good communication throughout different groups in the community and all levels of our government. So that made it easier. So in the middle of March, the city, the mayor and I thought it might be a good idea to get all representatives from every level of our government. So from the county, from Jim Desmond's office, from the state, from Tasha Borner-Horvath, and then Mike Levin from Congress. And it has been, because the COVID crisis has really impacted all of us. But it's also, it's so broad that you need you need a representative from each level to address that part of the issue. So whether it's health permits with the county, whether it's, excuse me, business license from the city or different regulations from the state, it's important to get everyone in the same room so you can address the challenges that businesses are going to have getting up and running again. So it has been, like I said, it has been one of the bright spots so far. I think it's going to continue to be a challenge. What we need to do from now on is get more impact from our businesses and our nonprofits to see how we can better help from these different, or the information we can get to our representatives and see if we can make improvements on getting our economy back up and moving. And I think one of the big challenges for me is what can the city do to be more business friendly, cut red tape, and make this recovery easier. And sometimes I think government or the city forgets that we're in a customer service business, and it's we're there to help facilitate business and help you be more successful. So that's the goal of this. So I'm going to pass this off in just a second to Michelle Geller. She's our new economic development manager. You all know has been doing a fantastic job with outreach. Every business I've talked to so far has heard from her a couple times. So I think that's been very helpful. And there's been a lot of little things we have done so far, whether it's leaving certain parking lots open that were going to be closed by the beach, but making them 15-minute for takeout, or addressing ABC issues. But there's been a lot of things that have made it easier to operate in these new restrictions. So if Michelle, you want to take over real quick and talk about some of the finer points of what we've been doing and trying to help businesses get going.
Yeah, thanks, Councilman Keim. And I appreciate the accolades, but honestly, I think the city's partners, the Chamber, MainStreet, and Visit Oceanside have been also instrumental in just being those boots on the ground organizations, talking to businesses and getting feedback. So thank you to everyone. And they are also at the table with the elected officials that Councilman Keim mentioned. So far, we've heard nothing but positive things about the way Oceanside has been very proactive. I think you are aware that our city council sent a letter to the county. It wasn't a demand letter, but basically saying, we would like a plan for reopening and kind of pushing for that. And that really seems to have worked. And of course, we want to do it in a safe way, the right way. But I think that it's important that we are talking about it. And I think Oceanside has really been, spearheading that. And the Economic Recovery Task Force that Councilman Keim and Mayor Weiss initiated has been able to bring the elected officials to the table with our city stakeholders, and things like state relief for like restaurants being able to offer takeout, wine, things like that, that they relaxed regulations, and having Assembly Member Tasha Borner-Horvath at the table to bring ideas back to the governor. Same with having Congressman Levin at the table. When the SBA loan applications were just a complete fiasco, he was there to kind of say like, hey, this is just phase one. We're going to have a phase 2 and a phase 3. So, don't worry, it'll all work out. So, and then of course, Supervisor Desmond, who has really been, proactively trying to get a plan for reopening the county's economy. So, it's just been, I think, a really badge of honor for City of Oceanside and our partners that we're really at the forefront of all of this.
All right, thank you for that, Michelle. And I actually just got word that it's Michelle Geller's birthday, so happy birthday.
Birthday, Michelle.
Aw, thanks.
We're gonna actually pass it off to Rick from Main Street.
And Ro, can I say a couple more things?
Oh yeah, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's it. There's a couple things I wanted to mention. I saw Bill Burney on here from Frontway. So one of our big challenges we heard from the beginning was getting these SBA loans from some of the big banks. Some of our businesses weren't getting calls back. They were getting a call back 3 weeks later with a response saying you didn't check this box, so it's been denied and the money's gone. And I think that was one of the more frustrating feedback I got from some of our businesses. So Bill really filled that void and Frontwave has stepped up or that direct credit union in the city that have been able to, for everything I've heard, when somebody submits an application, they get a call back within a half hour, an hour, this on Friday, Saturday night. And it has been incredible to hear that positive feedback. And I think that's going forward, the next tranche of SBA money, that's going to be critical, is to actually find that link to that money to our small businesses, so it doesn't bypass it like the first couple did. And that's why, having Kyle here from Mike Levin's office, if we can all be on the same page and make sure that the money gets to our local banks, that can make sure it gets to our local small businesses. And I think that's been a concern of mine so far. And when we wrote, the council decided to write this letter, I think there was some messaging challenges and errors that went out. It wasn't a demand letter. It's just we were voicing some concerns with the way that essential and non-essential businesses operated. And one of them for me was, you'd see these big box type stores, a Walmart or a Target, that could operate still because they sold essential items. So they sold food or batteries or whatever you needed, but they also sold t-shirts and sandals and sunscreen. So you can buy those there, but Surfride, which sells that down the street, couldn't operate. So you see this, I thought, a massive transfer of wealth to these big corporations who also got more of the stimulus money too. So it was kind of a double whammy for our small businesses. And I think that is, we're trying to figure out ways to fix that going forward, but it's tough because we need someone from every level to address it. So, but going forward, we need that input. So anybody here, if there's something we can do better, or if you see a gap, we're going to try to fill those like we did with Frontwave and getting money from the stimulus directly to us. So we understand this is a collaborative partnership with the county, with our other cities, and that's the way we've been working to get around those. I think it's been successful so far. We just had the way that everyone's come together has been fantastic. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you for that, Ryan, and thank you guys for just continuing to be advocates for our small businesses. So with that, we're going to pass it off to Rick Wright, and he's going to give you an update on projects that were recently passed by our Downtown Advisory Committee.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for giving me this opportunity, Emerald, to report on two really great projects that were reviewed by the Downtown Advisory Committee on April 22nd. Shout out to the city for creating a really neat hybrid meeting model so that everybody could participate. Some of us that are not willing to attend meetings in public just yet participated over the phone, and then some people, including Scott, participated in person. But because they were able to televise the program on KOCT, we could follow along from home with what was going on in the council chambers, and it really worked out great. And it gives us the opportunity to keep these important projects going forward in this crazy time. The first project that the DAC reviewed was Alta Oceanside, which is a 5-story mixed-use project on North Coast Highway directly across from In-N-Out Burger and the Chamber of Commerce Welcome Center complex. The project assembles 5 parcels into a 5.31 acre site, which includes the property on which the main attraction Gentlemen's Club currently sits. The project consists of 309 apartment units, and 5,400 square feet of commercial space in a single freestanding building. The applicant is requesting a density bonus for the project in return for 26 very low income units. 503 parking spaces are provided in the building, and an additional 25 parking spaces are provided in a surface parking lot north of the building. Project amenities include over 42,000 square feet of common open space, including courtyards, roof deck, and side yards. And private open space is provided in the form of balconies or patios for each apartment unit. The project has almost 12,000 square feet of indoor amenities such as a library, yoga fitness room, clubhouse, and leasing office. And the Downtown Advisory Committee voted to recommend this project to the Community Development Commission with some notes on the architecture that was presented. And then the second project that we reviewed is called Sunsets, and it's a 6-story mixed-use project on North Horn Street across from the Mission Square Shopping Center. The project consists of 76 residential units and 1,580 square feet of ground floor commercial space on a half-acre site. 5 one-bedroom units would average 600 feet in size, and 71 two-bedroom units would average 875 square feet in size. A total of 172 parking spaces are provided. Project amenities include 7,729 square feet of common open space, including courtyard, rooftop deck, and outdoor pedestrian plaza. And private open space is provided in the form of almost 8,000 square feet of patios and balconies. A 76-space bike locker would be available to residents. And the DAC voted to recommend this project to the Community Development Commission. Also, Jeff Hunt, City Planner Jeff Hunt, reported that the Planning Department is working with California Coastal Commission staff on the downtown zoning overlay and the downtown density plan revision recently approved by the Community Development Commission. The Residence Inn project on North Coast Highway, formerly the Flying Bridge, is also at the Coastal Commission. A request for a conditional use permit for the Oddfellows Hall is under review. The RFP for the North County Transit District Oceanside Transit Center redevelopment project is still awaiting responses for review. And the Oceanside Beach Resort project has been delayed until February 2021 due to heavy rain. And that was it.
Rick, we do have a question from Haley with Intessa. She's asking, were both projects approved by the DAC unanimously? Excuse me.
Thanks for asking that, Haley. And I didn't report that because I couldn't remember exactly what the votes were on that. My feeling was it was unanimously, but I'm reluctant to say that because I wasn't sure. I think we did approve them unanimously. It was a little confusing because there were people raising their hands in the chamber and we were trying to vote over the phone. So I'm really not positive on that.
All right, well, thank you for that, Rick. We're gonna move on over to Russ Cunningham. He is the principal planner for the City of Oceanside, and he's gonna offer an overview on the city's general plan update process.
Good morning, everybody. So I'd like to begin by just giving a shout out to my city colleagues. Councilmember Ryan has been so great to work with. His measured, practical, humane approach to leadership is really appreciated. I want to thank Michelle for valuing the role that planning plays in our city operations and in our efforts to promote economic development. Sometimes economic development and planning can be at loggerheads with one another. That's never been the case under Michelle's tenure. So thank you, Michelle. And Kyle, I want to thank Kyle for appreciating that the future is green. And I really admire his passionate advocacy for much of what I'm going to speak about this morning. So I'm going to attempt my first screen share here. And you can let me know if you're seeing my screen. Great, I got a thumbs up from Michelle there, thank you. So I'm privileged to be managing a number of long-range planning projects on the city's behalf, including the general plan update and the local coastal program update. My presentation today focuses on the recently adopted first phase of the general plan update, as well as our current efforts to implement that phase. I'll also give you an overview of phase 2 of the general plan update, which we've just initiated, and we look forward to your involvement in this next phase. Phase 2 has a lot of moving parts. It's likely the most ambitious and complex long-range project the city has ever undertaken in its 100+ year history. So we need all hands on deck, and we need those of you in leadership positions and with a high level of familiarity with the city to participate. I'm going to begin by essentially making the case for planning. So as we gather over the ether this morning, showing just how conversant we've become with technology that many of us hadn't even heard of 2 months ago, this seems an opportune time to talk about change and what local communities can do to anticipate it, prepare for it, embrace it, and to some degree shape it. Of course, change is inevitable. I like how Octavia Butler expresses that the only lasting truth is change. This pandemic has really reminded us of this truth, while also reminding us of our capacity to not only adapt to these changes, but to harness them and essentially bend the curve in the direction we want to see it go. Consider how we've bent the curve of infection, suffering, death, and turned what could have been utter chaos into a relatively functional, albeit evolving system that is helping to keep us safe and connected and productive. Williams Jennings Bryant said, destiny is not a matter of choice, it is a matter, is not a matter of chance, it is a matter of choice. It is not a thing to be waited for, it is a thing to be achieved. So encouraging us to be proactive in pursuing our future. And then finally from Barbara Kingsolver, the changes we dread most may contain our salvation. Planning can be hard, thinking about the future can be frightening, and the things that we need to do can be very difficult, but they may be precisely what we need to do. So I think of planning as essentially managing change. Under this definition, we're essentially all planners, right? We're obviously experiencing abrupt and disruptive change right now, change we can't help but be aware of, change we're forced to deal with in real time as it's happening. And I think the city is doing that well. This is change that has us, frankly, in triage mode right now. And this is due, at least in part, to our failure to anticipate and proactively plan. And I'm speaking at the national level, international level, state level, proactively plan for what some experts have been warning us about for years. So these are some examples of abrupt, disruptive change. Of course, then there's change that has a way of sneaking up on us. It's organic, it's incremental, it's less perceptible, and we often don't recognize it until it's in our rearview mirrors. Arguably, for better or for worse, much of the change that the City of Oceanside has seen over the past several decades fits into this category of incremental change. I've tried to align some corollaries here between those abrupt and unanticipated forms of change and how those came about as a result of incremental change. So I'm guessing you can probably see the linkages here between, say, the current pandemic and our public health trends and the public health apparatus we've put in place, et cetera. Going to the bottom of the list there, gridlock is something that we often find we wake up to one day, but the reality is that population growth, housing growth, job growth, that has happened incrementally. Have we prepared for that effectively? Gridlock suggests that we perhaps haven't planned as well for growth as we might have. So I think what's worth being optimistic about is the fact that all of these forms of change present learning opportunities. And certainly we're going to go to school on the city's history, particularly since the adoption of the last land use element, which is the crux of the general plan. That was 34 years ago. What's transpired over those 34 years, and what can we learn from that experience? So these are some of the consequences of not thinking ahead, of not planning, not being mindful of the future. And I'm going to allow an iconic figure from one of television's greatest artistic and cultural triumphs to illustrate what often happens when we don't think about the changes that are to come. So complacency is often what comes about when we don't have a plan that we are accountable for. Confusion, this is something that we sometimes create for our development community when we have standards and protocols that are archaic and ambiguous. And that's a key component of this project, is to make our standards, make our expectations as clear as possible. Of course, we want to avoid panic. We are experiencing some of that today. The more we can get out ahead of change and the more we can remain flexible in the face of unanticipated change, the less panic we're likely to experience, and ultimately less regret. So if there is an overarching theme, encompassing theme guiding our long-range planning efforts, that theme is sustainability. The term sustainability is becoming a little worn. I'll grant that, perhaps a little too broadly applied, but the concept of sustainability remains very relevant, very meaningful, very powerful. Here is a generally accepted definition of the term. Sustainability is the process of managing change to ensure that the use of resources, financial investment, technological advancement, and institutional change all serve to enhance both current and future potential to meet human needs and aspirations. So this graphic you see in the middle is meant to speak to what's often referred to as the triple bottom line of economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability, often expressed as social equity. So these are some of the things that we're trying to achieve economically, environmentally, looking at the co-benefits of environmental quality and environmental health from an economic standpoint, and looking at ways to ensure that prosperity is shared by all sectors of the community. We want to make this as interactive as possible. So to that end, we wanted to introduce some questions to you, some of them a bit provocative, to get you thinking about this project and how you can help us guide it. I believe Emerald will be posting these questions in chat. What makes an economy sustainable? How does environmental health contribute to economic development? How do we create a more equitable local economy? Is it good economic policy to promote infill and redevelopment as alternatives to urban sprawl? Is there economic benefit in reducing the city's reliance on fossil fuel? And is there economic benefit in conserving the city's agricultural resources? More on that later. So almost exactly a year ago, the City Council adopted the first phase of the general plan update. That included an economic development element, an energy and climate action element, and the city's first climate action plan. This is a pretty unorthodox way to initiate a general plan update, but I think in retrospect, it made a lot of sense to introduce these two new elements that really speak to some of the most abiding, most immediate concerns of the city. From an economic standpoint, our job space, economic diversity, pursuing high-paying jobs, bringing base industries to the city that can enhance the multiplier effect, enhancing sales tax revenue, improving workforce readiness, and bringing more local goods and services to Oceanside residents. And then with respect to environmental concerns, energy and climate action, putting us in step with state and regional efforts on emissions reduction, protecting and enhancing our natural resources, our water supply, and containing sprawl. I think it's important to observe that economic development and environmental health are not in any way mutually exclusive, but in fact largely complementary of one another. And I think it's important to establish that neither economic development nor environmental quality are really ends in and of themselves. Both of them are really about establishing and maintaining quality of life for our residents. So in that way, they have a common purpose and a common goal. So I'll talk just briefly about each of the elements and the climate action plan. So the economic development element is organized by themes. Those themes are quality of life, prosperity, resilience, and collaboration. Quality of life, I think, largely speaks for itself, but to my earlier point, we pursue economic development to enhance the quality of life of our residents, improving public health and safety. We know that having adequate quality housing is an important economic development goal. As I said earlier, improving access, local access to commercial goods and services enhances quality of life, but it also reduces our retail leakage and brings more revenue to the city to promote our fiscal health. Prosperity speaks to our efforts to be a business-friendly community, to, as I said before, increase high wage employment, increase that multiplier effect where dollars continue to circulate within the local economy, obviously attracting new businesses, and really leveraging what the many attributes that this city has to grow our economy, diversify our economy. And speaking of economic diversity, that's really where resilience comes in. We don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. When downturns occur, we're better served when we have a diverse economy. And of course, resilience also means being energy efficient, moving toward energy independence, and not allowing our energy needs to be something that affects our margins, essentially both in government and in the business community. And then collaboration ultimately, I think, is a powerful theme in that cities have tended to compete against one another. And with entities like Innovate 78, that model is starting to change. Cities are starting to recognize that they have obviously mutual goals. They can support one another. They can approach issues, economic issues, other issues from a regional standpoint, achieve some economy of scale, and help each other rather than compete against each other. The energy and climate action element is focused on these themes that really, I think, largely speak for themselves, pursuing energy efficiency and renewable energy, as we approach build out, moving towards smart growth and multimodal transportation. This may be one area where when we look back, we may have a little bit of regret that we haven't been particularly mindful of the need to expand multimodal transportation options for our residents and for our workers and our visitors. And we've also allowed a lot of inefficient land use to occur. So going forward, frankly, we don't have those land resources available to continue that trend. We need to look towards smart growth. Zero waste, I think many of you know that we have a very aggressive zero waste program. We're a leader in the region in reducing the percentage of solid waste that ends up in landfills and contributes to greenhouse gas emissions. We're also a leader in water conservation with our recycled water programs, our local water harvesting. Urban greening, I'm going to talk a little bit about an ordinance that we're moving forward as a climate action plan implementation measure that will help to expand the urban forest here in Oceanside. Local agriculture, this is obviously a hot topic right now, and I'll speak in a moment as part of phase 2 to how we're addressing the effort to conserve our local agricultural resources. And then this concept of sustainable consumption, whereby we become very mindful of our purchasing habits as consumers and making good sustainable decisions about what we purchase, how it's packaged, how it's moved, how it's produced, things of that sort. So the Climate Action Plan includes a range of emission reduction measures that are organized thematically. The first category here in blue is energy efficiency and renewable energy. These are measures related to water, the distribution of water, the treatment of water, the treatment of wastewater. This is our solid waste, or what Colleen Foster in Water Utilities likes to refer to as zero waste, for good reason. And then a series of policies that are about merging land use planning and transportation planning to leverage those two efforts to ensure that we are growing efficiently and growing in ways that promote multimodal transportation, walkability, synergies between different land uses like residential and commercial. So these are some additional policies in the realm of land use and transportation, rendering our streets more complete, not just for automobiles, but for pedestrians, for cyclists, for transit, and other modes of transportation. Urban forestry and agriculture, these are our policies in that realm. One exciting measure in this realm is carbon farming, the idea that we can turn agriculture from a net emitter of GHG emissions to a net sequesterer of emissions through innovative soil management techniques. A really key component of the Climate Action Plan is what's called the consistency checklist. This is a very common feature in climate action plans today, and it is generally favored by the business community because it brings a certain amount of certainty and efficiency to the review process. The checklist establishes certain requirements that, if met, waive the requirement to conduct extensive project-specific emissions analysis. So under the Environmental Quality Act, there is a requirement for projects to assess their GHG emissions and whether those emissions are over a threshold of significance. That can be a very time-consuming, very costly analysis. That analysis doesn't have to occur if a project is consistent with the checklist. The features of the checklist are these. So we have locational criteria. Is the project within a smart growth opportunity area? Is it in a priority transit corridor? And I'll talk about that in a moment. Is the land use and zoning consistent with our general plan and our zoning ordinance? If it's not, are the projected emissions comparable to what we would see from a project that is consistent with land use and zoning. If it's outside of a smart growth area, we would ask that the applicant conduct an energy efficiency audit and that they look for ways to reduce vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. And then the measures that I'll talk about now that we're pursuing as part of the implementation of phase 1, a renewable energy requirement, an EV parking and charging requirement, recycled water infrastructure that allows that project, that site, to be served by future recycled water, transportation demand management in the non-residential sector, and urban forestry. So let me talk about each of those just very briefly. So you may know that the state of California has fairly aggressive requirements through the California Green Code for renewable energy facilities in residential development. So new single-family development, new multifamily development under 3 stories is required to install essentially solar photovoltaic that to offset essentially 100% of anticipated electricity demand. Our standards go a little bit beyond in that they would require development above 3 stories to provide renewable energy facilities. And we're not specific because we're holding out the possibility that there may be other options other than just solar PV. Wind may be one option. That these projects that meet these thresholds seen here would install solar or wind facilities that offset at least 50% of their anticipated electricity demand. This is a brochure that we will make available to applicants to help them navigate this process. And I'm going to show you the brochures created by our staff, Shannon Vitale, Scott Nightingale, and Stephanie Cervantes. This was Shannon's project working on renewable energy. Scott Nightingale worked on electric vehicle parking and charging. We're essentially requiring, this is another area where the state has established some requirements. Ours goes slightly above those state requirements to say that 15% of parking spaces in both residential, multifamily residential, and non-residential will be reserved for electric vehicles. And of those, half of those spaces will be outfitted with charging facilities to expand our electric vehicle charging infrastructure here in the region. Stephanie Cervantes worked on our urban forestry ordinance. We already have landscape requirements, but we've never had a requirement that a project achieve a minimum amount of tree canopy, which is what this is about. I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of trees, other forms of plant life, sequestering greenhouse gas emissions, taking them out of the atmosphere and bringing them into plant material and soil. So to the extent that we can expand our urban forest in Oceanside, we have more sequestration happening. So the requirements here range anywhere from 7 to 12% minimum tree canopy. We're trying to provide a lot of flexibility in how that tree canopy is met, and we're trying to provide a lot of resources to folks, again, to help them navigate this requirement. On the right, you can see some of the co-benefits associated with urban forestry. So this isn't all about sequestration. It's about stormwater management. It's about cleaning the air of pollutants. It's about reducing the urban heat island effect. Tree canopy can significantly reduce energy demand in the summer and the cost of energy consumption. So we're going to emphasize those co-benefits of urban forestry just as much as its sequestration potential. Finally, transportation demand management. Not a new concept, but the idea is that we encourage our business owners and our developers to look for ways to encourage employees to find alternative ways of getting themselves to the workplace. So the requirement for development of a certain scale, non-residential development of a certain scale, that would be projects that are going to generate at least 50 vehicle trips, commute vehicle trips daily, that they implement a transportation demand management plan that reduces single occupancy vehicle combustion engine commute trips by at least 20%. We would allow electric vehicles to qualify. They would qualify as an alternative form of commuting. And of course, as we've all seen over the course of the pandemic, telework, which we're all engaged in at the moment, is a new reality. And that should go a long way toward helping businesses meet this minimum mode share requirement. Obviously, not all businesses can accommodate telework, but we want to provide as much flexibility in how these standards are met. So essentially, the themes we've worked with, the objectives we've had in mind as we've prepared these ordinances, which go before Kyle and the Planning Commission on the 18th of this month, and before Councilmember Keim and the City Council on the 17th of June. What we've really tried to do here is make these requirements outcome-based. We tried to keep the requirements simple and unambiguous. We've tried to provide a lot of flexibility in terms of how requirements are met to encourage innovation. And we've provided resources, including these brochures, that help applicants understand what is expected of them and how they can meet these expectations going forward. And we fully accept that these requirements will probably have to evolve as circumstances change. So that's kind of where we are on phase 1 and efforts to implement the Climate Action Plan. Phase 2 involves the updating of all of the city's existing general plan elements. These are those elements. With the exception of community facilities, these are all state mandated elements. They can be arranged in any manner that a local jurisdiction chooses to arrange them. They can go by other names, but these are the topics that the state expects us to address in the general plan. Housing is the one element that has to be updated on a regular schedule. That's every 8 years, and that cycle ends next year. So we have a housing element due less than a year from now. So that is a priority for us with phase 2. There are 2 other components of this project that are going to inform the general plan update, the updating of these elements, and respond to some of the conditions that we face today here in Oceanside. The South Morrow Hills Community Plan, we received direction from the City Council in November of last year to prepare a community plan that furthers the agritourism effort that Leslie and others have been so involved in by moving us toward these more ambitious tier 2 uses, resorts, hotels, the real money makers, perhaps the real draws to create a true destination out in South Morrow Hills. Look at how we can maintain the viability of farming while also perhaps introducing more housing into that area and considering what the infrastructure needs are. So we're responding, of course, to the controversy generated by the North River Farms project, the fate of which I don't think anyone knows at this point. But that project really was a catalyst to get us thinking about what the future holds for this area and how we can guide that future. And then finally, another precursor project is the Smart and Sustainable Corridors Plan. This is a Caltrans funded project where we're essentially looking to establish the expectation with our community that growth going forward will occur in our already urbanized areas in the form of infill and redevelopment. So Coast Highway, Mission Avenue, Oceanside Boulevard, Vista Way. These are the areas where we want to bring in additional housing, expand our housing stock, and of course, allow that housing, those additional rooftops to catalyze additional commercial development to achieve that synergy between housing and non-residential uses. I'm happy to talk about any of these in more detail, but I'm really more interested in the dialogue and your questions. So some of our next steps are to develop a public outreach plan, look for ways to engage folks like you. We're working on technical background studies right now so that we really understand existing conditions, what needs to change. And then ultimately, we will develop a vision and some guiding principles that we will take out to the community for their input. And of course, on the front end, we will have the community involved in helping us generate that vision and generate those guiding principles. So with that, I stand open to your questions and comments.
All right. Any questions that you guys have for Russ, you're welcome to submit those in the chat. We're going to go ahead and stop the screen share and move into our legislative updates. So first off, we're going to hear from Congressman Mike Levin's office. We have Kyle Crahill Frolander. Kyle, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. Just wanted to update you on a few things that the Congressman's been working on. Obviously, there's mostly related to addressing the crisis, but regular day-to-day work also continues on some of our important priorities. On those, I think for Oceanside, a big one is our Army Corps projects. You all are probably familiar with the harbor dredging, which finished recently, but we have other Army Corps projects that are going on, and those are federal projects. And so we're been really bird dogging the Army Corps on those. And so just last week, we spoke to the Army Corps. We're in constant communications, basically. Congressman Levin's putting language into the next Water Resources Development Act. That's the omnibus legislation that directs the Army Corps' activities. And he's putting language in there about Oceanside's projects for the special shoreline study, which addresses the beach erosion that has been caused by the construction of the harbor by the military. The congressman's going to put in language that requires that study to finally be completed within the next 24 months. That project was put into federal law in about 2000, so it's way, way behind. But that holds the promise of being able to bring large amounts of federal money to address our beach erosion. So we've been pushing very hard on that because obviously that's a huge problem for our tourism industry and of course just our local quality of life. The other major project that has been hamstrung is the San Luis Rey River Flood Control Project. That's a project that's been around for over 50 years, actually. And so the congressman's inserting a legislative vehicle for what is called the Post-Authorization Change Report, which is important only to know that that is the cause of the current logjam for that project. And putting in that change report will allow more funding to advance that project, which is important for protecting our community from flooding in the San Luis Rey River Valley. But also there's dredging of that valley that allows for potential sediment capture, which can be also put onto our beaches. So those are aside from coronavirus. But I am happy to report that other legislation that you may not hear about is passing, as is usually my report to you all. The president signed Congressman Levin's Student Veteran Coronavirus Response Act into law. That ensures that student veterans will not see a reduction in their monthly housing allowance or any other benefits as a result of their schools moving online. As we know, instruction's going online all through out the education system, and we want to make sure that veterans aren't losing the benefits that they get. So that thankfully has been signed into law, bipartisan, not the kind of thing that you hear on the news, but the important work that's protecting those who have served our country. On some of the more pressing matters around coronavirus, the congressman did lead a letter recently, got 15 of his colleagues on board to the vice president and the Health and Human Services secretary, calling for an aggressive, detailed national testing strategy. I think most of us recognize the importance of that. It highlights the lack of specific federal guidance, which is needed to implement an effective testing strategy, and experts agree. That's what we need in order to really be able to continue reopening in a safe and effective manner is a testing strategy. And then finally, I'll just close on, you may have read in the news that discussions are ongoing around a second CARES Act 2, if you will, which would really be the 5th tranche. But point being, to really focus on the economic relief to help what we've all been experiencing. And so one of the key priorities for Congressman Levin in the CARES Act, next one is funding for cities under 500,000 people. Those cities were left out of the first CARES Act. That left Oceanside, it left every city in our district out of the funding in the first CARES Act. And so actually just today, Congressman Levin issued a joint statement along with every mayor in our district, Mayor Weiss and every mayor signed on, calling for this direct funding for cities under 500,000. So we're optimistic that's going to be included. It's sounding like that will at least be included in the House bill, but that's vital so that we don't cut the basic services, our public safety and others. And then just I'll close there also with to Bill Burney, at the suggestion of Mayor Weiss, I'll be reaching out to you today, talk about your experience implementing the Paycheck Protection Program, the great work you've been doing, so that you can let us know how it can be improved during this next infusion of funding for the program. So with that, happy to try to answer any questions. Just thank you all for letting me be here and talk to you.
Thanks for that, Kyle. Before we move on to Fernanda, we're actually going to jump back to Russ. We had a couple questions in the chat that we'd like you to address here. The first one is from Maria. She is asking, has there been a conversation on the cultural district and the arts and the general and quality of life and economic development? So that's for you, Russ. I went ahead and unmuted your mic, so go ahead and answer when you're ready.
Maria, thank you so much for that question. I mentioned my colleague Shannon Vitale participating in the implementation of the Climate Action Plan. She's also been very involved in the development of the Arts Master Plan, working closely with CJ Demento in the library, and I've had some peripheral involvement in that. One thing we're doing right now is looking at that plan, other recently adopted plans like our Parks and Rec Master Plans, to see, what foundation we already have in place that we can leverage and build upon. We certainly recognize cultural venues, existing cultural venues like our museums as tourist draws, as assets that make Oceanside a true destination, and we want to continue to promote that. I really love Leslie's idea of expanding the experience, the visitor experience in Oceanside, such that folks who perhaps in the past came for the weekend to enjoy the beach can now come for a week and experience the beach, experience these cultural venues, go out to South Morrow Hills and taste wine and enjoy that bucolic environment. So from that standpoint, we're definitely very mindful of our cultural resources and our cultural planning efforts. And then back to that theme of quality of life, to the extent that we can promote these as resources for the community, for our young people, to grow cultural awareness. I think we want to look at that through both of those lenses, essentially.
All right, thank you for that, Russ. Another question, with the pandemic, we've seen an interest in suburban development. Where does the city see workforce housing going in the future?
We have been giving a lot of thought to what we've been reading in the media, what we have been hearing from some residents, this concern that there is this strong relationship between density and our susceptibility to contagion. The data is quite mixed, but it's very easy to look at what transpired in New York and make assumptions about density being essentially a hazard. We're in the process of better understanding the various factors that have contributed to the spread of the virus. And what we're recognizing is that it's manifold. There are many, many factors involved here. Density may be one, but it's important to recognize that what we have been promoting through the Coast Highway Corridor Study and the Incentive District, what we will likely be promoting through the Smart and Sustainable Corridors Plan in terms of levels of density are many, many times exponentially lower than densities found in major metropolitan areas. So I can tell you that Manhattan Island has a density of 70,000 residents per square mile. Oceanside has a density of 4,000 people per square mile. We may see densities in the range of 10,000 people per square mile in our corridors if we do see more infill and redevelopment, but those will still be exponentially lower figures than what we're seeing in some of these other areas. But I don't want to suggest again that density is the boogeyman here. I think we have still a lot to learn about, among other things, how we respond to these situations and how we plan for them in advance.
Thank you for
From
that.
a programmatic standpoint.
We have just one more question, and it's regarding the ag land that the city owns. So if you're able to share possibly the amount that the city owns, and if there are, any plans to conserve that land or potentially acquire more, are you able to share more details on that?
Yeah, and let me just clarify my last response. I don't know how well I answered the question. So in terms of workforce housing, we are looking at providing that housing in our urbanized corridors. And we are looking at programs that have been enabled through state legislation that would allow a streamlining of the development review process for workforce housing in those areas. So hopefully that's a more complete answer to that last question. And on this question of agricultural resources, the city doesn't actually own any ag land. The ag land in South Morrow Hills is all privately held. An interesting dynamic out there is the relationship between the large holdings that are commercially farmed and smaller holdings that are oftentimes just avocationally farmed or not farmed at all. So we're really looking for ways to bring together members of the South Morrow Hills community who experience South Morrow Hills very differently, those who conduct business out there and those who reside out there. There's been a little bit of a divide between those folks and how they see the future of that area. And that's a divide we hope to bridge somewhat through the community plan.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Russ. I think that answers both of those questions very thoroughly. We're going to move on over to our legislative update. So we're going to hear from Fernando over at Assemblymember Tasha Borner-Horvath's office. So Fernando, we're going to go ahead and unmute your mic.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So just a few updates. As some of you may know, the legislature is back in session as of Monday. So the conversations really are shifting towards economic recovery and what the appropriate response is to COVID-19. And the Assembly member, as many other legislators, are refining their legislative packages to ensure that we provide that meaningful relief that a lot of people need on the state level. And as part of some of the work the Assembly member's been doing here in the district, and while she's been in the district, she's been focusing a lot on economic recovery. She's participated in the Oceanside Recovery Economic Task Force. So she's really enjoyed, hearing from city leaders and other organizations in the city to bring that feedback up to the governor and his administration. And we've been able to address some of the concerns the city has, and we're really grateful for this opportunity to partner with the city to address a lot of these concerns. Another thing is that the Assembly member received permission from the Speaker of the Assembly to gather information for legislators by interviewing economists throughout the state. So she's been actively doing that and getting information to properly inform her colleagues on best methods to move forward. And just as an FYI for everyone, the Assembly member will be hosting a workshop for restaurants in our district. So this workshop will primarily be, some strategies that they can use for adapting during these times. It'll be co-hosted by Cindy Darlington, who has worked, who has a career in marketing and consulting for restaurants. And we'll be working with our chambers to spread awareness of this workshop. So please feel free to let me know if you have any questions, and we'll be putting out announcements soon. So please feel free to send me emails with any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Fernando. We're going to move on over to County Supervisor Jim Desmond's office, and we're going to hear from his representative, Crystal Jabara.
Good morning, everyone. And let me first start off by saying thank you to the Chamber, who's been instrumental in getting the supervisor's message out and facilitating hearing back from businesses within the community. So thank you, Chamber. Thank you, City of Oceanside. And to our state and federal electeds, thank you for coordinating and helping answer questions when they come in. We appreciate it. I just put into the chat, and I know the Chamber has this as well as other MainStreet, Visit Oceanside, City of Oceanside has this. The County Board of Supervisors passed the Safe Reopening Plan. What it is a template, a guideline for businesses as the governor starts releasing in his phases these businesses that are allowed to open. This is a template or a guideline that businesses can use to show how they're going to safely reopen. The one question that we seem to get a lot on this, because it's so unusual for government, is this plan does not need to be submitted to the county. It doesn't need to be signed off by anyone at the county. What needs to be done is it needs to be filled out. And on the first letter A, where it talks about signage, it needs to be posted. This plan needs to be posted at all the public entrances. So it'll be a self-monitoring process. People will, as we know, usually it'll be complaint driven. We'll be working with the different cities. So City of Oceanside, obviously their police department is having to do a lot of the enforcement as well as code enforcement. So we'll be working with businesses to make sure we've even kind of walked some of them through how to fill out the form and help to answer questions. So that was passed at the Board of Supervisors on Tuesday. Our plan is also with that vote, we asked that a letter be sent to the governor. The Board of Supervisors will be sending a letter to the governor asking for local control and the phased opening of businesses. We've heard from all of these businesses. We have more than 500 plans, small and big businesses, on how they can safely reopen. We feel like our public health officer has done an extraordinary job. We think in San Diego County, we can self-monitor and roll out these phases ourselves. And then also the Board of Supervisors asked for a liaison for businesses to, or an ombudsman, however that works out, where they can reach out directly to someone at the county, get their questions answered quickly instead of having to come to their supervisor's offices. And then we get the questions answered and relay it back. So those are the 3 points that happened. And then also the Supervisor Desmond and Supervisor Gaspar passed a business stability plan, which is at the last board meeting, they asked for fees to be waived or deferred, streamlined. So as these businesses start to open, if they need inspections, if you're a restaurant, need an inspection, or if you need a new permit, if that permit's $1,200, we're going to defer that down till you're actually open and have business coming in and can pay for that. So we're trying to remove any constraints that people have, monetary constraints to reopening, or to even schedule an inspector to come out, which backlog will be tremendous. So a lot going on in the county right now. If there's any questions, I'll put my email into chat. I think most of you have it, or you can run it through the chamber and they'll get it to us.
Awesome, thank you for that. So we're gonna move on to some of our announcements, and one group I wanna have you guys hear from is MainStreet Oceanside, and they're gonna share, we have Gumaro here, he's gonna share some more information on their Oceanside Strong program. So go ahead, Gumaro.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. For some reason, my video is not showing, but I wanted to share my screen too. So this is the first time me doing this, so bear with me. There you go. All right. So basically, MainStreet Oceanside has developed a GoFundMe page. We're doing a campaign called Oceanside Strong. We launched this last Friday. Over the weekend, we raised over $5,000 over with our immediate network that we have, which was amazing. Actually, it was one of the best things that I see, that we're trying to create unity and that we're still here working together. The idea for Oceanside Strong, it's not really about the money. Honestly, I think the money is just going to be a helping hand for the small businesses that are really struggling to receive PPP, or they don't qualify for whatever reasons they have. But this is, we're trying to give out little mini grants to our small businesses from 250 to 1,000. The more we raise, the more money, we can get for these guys. We're opening applications next Friday so we can receive them. They might go live on this coming week here towards the end, but we're definitely going live next week for this application to see how many small businesses come and receive this little relief from us. With that said, I want to show you guys also a trailer. And by the way, for every $25 that you donate, you get a free mask. If you saw the campaign there in the front, those are the masks. We work a partnership with Whitlock Inc., which is just down the street from our office. They are a screen printing company, also a retailer, and they also do surf lessons. And they also shape boards inland of Oceanside. So they're really a family-owned business, and they partner with us where a portion of those proceeds of the sales, additional sales of the mask, will benefit Oceanside Strong campaign. So we're doing a few things here and there. And then we're also doing more marketing too with this. And also what we did a couple weeks ago, we interviewed some of the businesses. So I want to show a little trailer with you guys so you guys can see what we're doing. We have already launched this earlier this week, and we're going to be releasing more videos next week. I believe Emerald is in one of these videos, so it'd be nice to share the chamber side of what COVID has done. But we're doing stories for businesses and how they were impacted. So I'm going to go ahead and show this video right now. Let me know if you guys don't hear or see well here.
Hey, my name is Lamona Skasiga. I'm with MainStreet Oceanside. I'm the MainStreet Program Manager.
I'm Kathy Nykel. I'm with MainStreet Oceanside, the Sunset Market Manager, Parade Coordinator, and a variety of other things.
I'm Skip Coomber. This is my wife, Maureen Coomber. We own Coomber Craft Wines Oceanside.
And we are Oceanside Strong.
Brandon Foster, and we're Oceanside Strong. Hey guys, this is Al Gordon with the Let's Get It podcast. I'm very excited to partner up with MainStreet Oceanside to launch our Oceanside Strong campaign.
My number one priority was to support the businesses around me. Because being in this space is no fun if I'm the only one here. If we reopen and I'm the only one here, it's no fun, right? The fun is having the other businesses around me and having everyone doing well.
I get people from all over Southern California into my salon for this because it's definitely a niche that nobody's really tapped into, unfortunately.
And my once-a-week customers came twice a week, and my once-a-monthers came twice a month, and most of them doubled up. Counting us all up.
You look so devastated. I said, so I gave them a list of 10 things to do that are free right now. Get this what you need to do to get in the door.
We have wineries, we have restaurants, we have retail spaces. We have so many businesses in Oceanside. As of today, and as of what appears to be the coming months, we have plenty of food, we have plenty of resources.
I want you to give these to any person you see who comes by who doesn't appear that they would have the wherewithal. You might call it almost whatever you want to call that person. If they don't appear to have the wherewithal to purchase these items, give them one.
And we're so open, we're innovative, and we're going to serve you in a safe and happy way.
Hi, I'm Michelle with Bliss Tea and Treats, and we're Oceanside Strong.
Hi, I'm Sam from Rimtale Thai Cuisine, and I'm Oceanside Strong. The lights are on, the beach is still right here. Yeah. The air is nice. Mother Nature's enjoying this time off as well. So we're still here. We got to do what we can for everyone and just be as safe as possible.
Love you, Oceanside. See you soon.
So this was a great partnership. This production team approached me that they want to do something for the community, so we went ahead and did this here. And you know, and plus I want to thank those that are in this platform right now that has donated. I see a lot of great faces here that has invested in this community. We're Oceanside strong, and I believe our small businesses are a testament to that. They're being very creative on finding ways to make a living or even support their employees. So it's a really good campaign. I think it's definitely is about getting our momentum going still. This is not forgetting our downtown or our city. So far I'm getting good response, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you guys like, or if you guys would like to donate, please visit our website.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Gumaro. And if you could, oh, Haley just beat me to it. Thank you for sharing that, Haley, in the chat function. You guys can find more information on that. Then next announcement, we're going to hear from John Osborne over at AT&T. He's going to share something that some of our 78 corridor chambers of commerce have been working on. So go ahead, John.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Yeah, AB 2421 is an assembly bill that the carriers are promoting to help us get permitting for bringing in permanent backup power to macro cell sites across the county and across the state, of course. So the problem that we're trying to solve is long delays in the permitting process. And so in working with the legislature, what we came up with is a way for us to work with the local cities under their process, use the city's process, but put a timeline on it so that we don't get these extensive delays. So the cities will have 60 days to approve a completed application, which is a fairly reasonable time frame. And if they don't or can't, for whatever reason, get through approving those permits, and there's not tons and tons of them, then those permits would be deemed approved. So what we're trying to do for the macro cell sites, these were designed to run on commercial power, and they don't necessarily have a generator on site. They were built with battery backup power that would last 4 to 6 hours. But what we have seen with the advent of the public safety power shutoffs is that we have extensive time periods where we lose electricity to these sites, and then we have to scramble to run out temporary generators. So what we came up with is approving a California Air Resources Board CARB compliant generator, which is defined as less than 50 horsepower, and then we would put these in to existing macro cell sites. So those sites are already permitted. This doesn't apply to small cells, which would ultimately house 5G. Those run already on commercial power, and there's not really an opportunity to put a backup there. What we want to do is keep people connected to 911 and emergency alerts, particularly during these power shutoffs, but also during natural disasters, fires, and things of that nature. So I broached the issue with Scott and the other chambers along the 78 corridor. It does already fit nicely within the public policy programs that the chambers have adopted. So all of the chambers signed on to a letter. That's going to go to the local government committee on May the 12th, where it will be the first hearing for this particular bill. So just wanted to give an update on that. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer that now or offline.
All right, thank you for that, John. And it looks like we have about 9 minutes left for some more announcements. So if you guys have something, if you can give me a little wave, we'll go ahead and unmute your mic and give you a couple minutes for that. I see Lori's got her hand ready. Go ahead, Lori.
Yeah, I just wanted to share and thank all of you who donated and gave to us for our food distribution. As I said in the chat box, tomorrow our food distribution, we're going to be serving 1,814 active duty and veterans coming through our parking lot in 474 cars. what we found from, this is our second distribution, is that we are in need of peanut butter. So we are going to be starting a peanut butter drive for our following distribution on Friday, June 12th. So I'm just going to ask if anybody is available or can supply us with some peanut butter. The Vance building is open. We're here, or text me, I'll come pick it up. We just have a lot of families with a lot of kids active duty, and peanut butter seems to be what they're looking for, and we just can't get enough of it. There's just too many people. So I'm just asking for a peanut butter drive.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Lori. Any other announcements? Just a quick hand. Go ahead, Rick.
Thanks. We made the hard decision yesterday, the parade committee, to cancel the Independence Parade for this year.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to move over to my next screen here. I know I have some other folks on the other side. Just really briefly, any other announcements? Going once, going twice. All right, guys, with respect to your time, we're going to go ahead and close out the meeting. What we'll do after is compile our chat, and we're going to send that out to everyone that had registered online. And if you give us some time just to convert this video, we'll distribute that out to you as well. But once again, if you have any questions or concerns in the meantime, don't hesitate to reach out to chamber staff. Our next meeting for Emerging Issues Forum will be scheduled for Thursday, June 4th at 8 a.m. and the Zoom details will be posted to our website shortly. Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.